sunny spaces, smiling faces, happy places. But every sunny space holds a shadow. Behind every smile are sharp teeth, and every happy place has something sinister lurking just below the surface.
Welcome to We Saw the Devil, the podcast diving deep into the chilling realms of true crime. Join your host Robin as she unravels mysteries that have left investigators baffled and armchair sleuths obsessed. Be forewarned, dear listener. We Saw the Devil is not for the faint of heart. Our unflinching exploration will take you to the darkest corners of the psyche and through the unimaginable depths of human darkness to unearth stark secrets to the harsh light of day. Nothing will be left untouched. Are you ready? Are you sure? We saw the devil.
Hello, everyone. You are listening to We Saw the Devil. This is Robin, and I am here with an episode on Lois Gibson, the most successful forensic artist in the world. And this is a We Saw the Devil Patreon request. It was voted on, was a finalist, and then selected. And I'm really excited about this one. I had heard of Lois's name. If you're into true crime in any capacity, you've definitely heard Lois Gibson's name. If you're not familiar with her, you are 100% familiar with a case that she has somehow touched. It was absolutely incredible. So this episode was a really awesome learning experience for me as well. I was going to have a live Discord chat tonight. I made an invite for the Patreon group earlier this evening. Super last notice, y'all. Ended up hanging around for a little bit. But yeah, I'm rescheduling the Discord chat for next Friday at 7 p.m. Central Time. And this is, again, not just for patrons. If you are liking the podcast or want to ask questions, talk, to me, feel free to join the Discord. You'll find the link in the show notes. Just click on it. You can sign up for Discord. And then next Friday at 7 p.m., I'm going to be doing this every other Friday. Basically, we hang out. I know that some of you guys are over Chris Chan. I know that it's kind of a 50-50 split right now on Chris Chan. Some of you are super enthralled by it. Some of you actually think it's really mean and you're overhearing about it. And I'm like 16 episodes in, so I've got to see it through. That being said, you can at least look forward to an actual episode of Straight True Crime every week now. But there will be another episode or 5 or 6 of Chris Chan. I'm sorry. Imagine having a unique talent that could, against all odds and likelihood, bring some of the worst perpetrators in this country to justice. Serial rapists, thieves, kidnappers, sex traffickers, murderers, serial killers. It's a talent so rare that only 30 to 40 people do it full time in the United States at this moment. And there's only between 200 and 300 in the entire world. And no, I'm not talking about psychics. I'm talking about Lois Gibson, a woman whom the Guinness Book of World Records deems the most successful forensic artist in the world. And in this episode, I'm going to be discussing Lois, who herself is a survivor of rape and attempted murder. I'll be touching on just a couple case highlights, as well as the importance of forensic artistry as a whole. And as I said in the beginning, Lois was a topic suggested to me and voted on by the We Saw the Devil Patreon. And although I had been familiar with the name, I really didn't know anything about her at all. So naturally, I first took to YouTube to get a feel for her. What kind of person is she? Because she's still alive and well. And Lois, if you are somehow listening to this or if you were sent this, I'm in love with you. Like, seriously, not only are you a legitimate gem of a human, I love your personality and your sense of humor, but you're a legitimate hero. Your desire to help people in the worst times of their life is beyond inspiring. Call me. In all seriousness, though, if any of you were to watch a presentation or an interview with Lois, the first thing that you might wonder is whether she's from New York or New Jersey. She has that feel to her. She's brash, bold, and tells it like it is with equal measures of sarcasm and sass. She's done countless interviews, and obviously one of the first questions that the journalist always asks is, how did you become a forensic artist? And the main line she uses as a response is, Well, someone wanted to kill me for fun a while ago. That's why I do what I do. Lois was born in 1950 and grew up in Missouri, dreaming of becoming an actress. So, naturally, at age 21, she moved to Los Angeles. And she was successful. She danced on TV, did modeling, and ended up in multiple magazines, including Playboy. One photo of her sitting on the ground is used quite frequently in most of the articles that she does, and she is absolutely stunning. Y'all, she's like Natalie Wood and Sophia Loren had a baby gorgeous, just beautiful. And now I just realized that I'm sounding like I'm creeping on Lois. And Lois, I love you, but you're 73 and I promise I'm not being a creep. But yeah, she was super successful and had a hot up and coming career. And she ended up becoming a dancer on The Real Dawn Steele show. And while she was dancing on the show, tragedy struck. One night, an intruder made his way into her apartment and brutally assaulted her. For almost half an hour, she was sexually assaulted and tortured. He strangled her with all of his power and would basically ease her in and out of consciousness. He would see her consciousness start to slip from being strangled, and then he would release his grip, starting the process all over again while he was assaulting her. Lois has described in other interviews how in that moment she said to herself, well, that's it. I'm gonna die here. And in her mind, she believed, just quick thinking, that in order to get the attack to stop, the man needed to climax. And as he was assaulting her, she made the barely conscious choice to begin moving her hips in time with his. Still repeatedly strangling her, nearly to death, he did actually climax and stood up. He turned around and said, "We'll have to date again," and then walked out of her apartment. Clinging to life with blood coming out of her eyes, her nose, her mouth, and pouring down the back of her throat, Lois had survived. And no, she didn't go report this crime to the police. This was 30 years ago. I mean, if any of you have seen any of the Playboy documentaries that have been made over the last year to, 1 to 3 years, you know the climate at that time. Police didn't take sexual assault seriously in any capacity. And when they did, the likelihood of the rapist being caught was super low. And that's not to even mention the shame and embarrassment the victim feels after the attack itself. And Lois was no different here. She didn't go to the police. She quit dancing. She started to fold in upon herself and became incredibly depressed. One story she tells is about how she was driving downtown and felt the sudden need, like absolute need, to turn down this certain street. And she had no business on this street. No reason for doing it, no reason to get this urge, but she felt, as she would later call it, a divine hand take the steering wheel and turn onto this random street. And as she did, she saw the man who had brutally attacked and raped her being arrested. He was handcuffed, his hands were cuffed behind his back, he was trying as hard as he could to fight the police, and then there was Lois sitting in her car watching the police beat the ever-loving shit out of this man with their batons. She maintains, and she says that some sort of divine intervention led to this interaction where she saw justice prevail. After that incident, she finished college and then moved to San Antonio. She enrolled in a dental school, but ultimately ended up quitting. And that's fine because the training that she received there did help her in her future work. She would spend her days and nights on the downtown Riverwalk as a sketch artist, and eventually she drew more than 3,000 portraits. And it was that further solidified and honed her craft. Lois moved to Houston and called up the local police department, basically telling them that she wanted a spot in the department. She wanted them to hire her. And they were like, no. But they did contact her eventually for a couple of cases. And just a few cases in, I think she says it was her third case or something like that. It was a murder case. She got her first murder case. She spoke with a witness and got a sketch. And after her sketch was released to the public, the roommate of the murderer actually called the police and turned him in. The police went there and they found the knife and the bloody underwear used in the assault and were able to arrest and charge the perpetrator with the crime. And in that moment, Lois became hooked. In an interview with Oprah's website O, Lois said, quote, "I've turned my attack into a means of getting justice for all the other victims. I know I'm getting back at the guy who hurt me. I'm getting back at his kind. It makes me feel powerful. I never thought I'd be powerful. I get this power over murderers and rapists from my drawings. The misery he gave me is a tool I use to commiserate with the witnesses and persuade them to pull out their memories." I mean, think about that for just a moment and how utterly powerful that is. She sits down with victims who have been raped, assaulted, tortured, or almost killed. Just like her, she had the same experience, not even that long before she started doing this. And she's able to draw on her own trauma to comfort and bring them into a headspace where she can extract information that's not primarily available in their mind. It's absolutely incredible. Now, even though there were some detractors within the department and a few people who thought that forensic art was just silly, the Houston Police Department did eventually hire her on. Captain Richard Williams of the Houston Police Department said this of Lois. He said, quote, "The real value of Lois Gibson is not her artistic talent, although that's pretty substantial. To be quite honest, artists are a dime a dozen. What Lois brings to the table is her ability to get inside the heads of folks who have been traumatized, who have only seen their perpetrators for a few seconds or a few minutes, and squeeze out those people's subconscious descriptions that she's able to translate to canvas." And he's not wrong. Lois's work has helped put over 1,300 criminals behind bars and bring justice to their victims. And as much as I love true crime, I knew surprisingly little about how forensic artists work. So I decided to watch one of Lois's seminars on Facebook. And I'm just so used to shows like Law and Order and other procedurals, where some hot actor or actress, someone slaps a little bit of dirt on them or a little bit of makeup, get them to look quote unquote traumatized. And then they give some shaky little speech or monologue about the event. And it's always so corny and cheesy. That's kind of what I was used to. They sit in front of an artist and, they recount this event and the artist is like, ho, 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 and then draws a spot on portrait of the perpetrator. Not at all like that in reality. So I watched a video and Lois breaks down her entire creative process, and I think it's actually really cool. First, the witness is seated across from her. The canvas is facing away from them so they can't see what she's drawing. Her number one thing that she does is she relaxes the witness. I mean, considering everything that they've been through, they're in a heightened state of awareness. They're defensive. Sometimes they're angry. She talks about how common it is for someone to yell at her, scream at her, get angry and upset with her. Some of her witnesses were almost murdered. Some of them are still in the hospital. She's been through pretty much all of it, it seems. So she tries to connect with them on a personal level, bring down their walls, loosen them up a little bit. And then they're handed a catalog of features. And this, I had no idea. What it is, it's a catalog. It'll start with hair. Okay, here are a bunch of different hairstyles, like 300 or 400 hairstyles for men and women. What did the perpetrator's hair look like? What did their nose look like? Here's 176 pairs of eyes. What did their eyes look like? Basically, the witness would take this catalog of features and they would go feature by feature and they would pick one. And what Lois does is she draws the features that they pick from the book. She starts at the top and goes down using pencils and pastels. Doing this method, she's done over 8,000 portraits. 8,000 portraits in this capacity. Something that she said that I found really, really, really interesting is when people tell her, "I never saw the face." Well, she says everyone sees the hair. So she calms them down. She talks to them, makes jokes, and she'll say, "What kind of hair did they have?" And 99% of the time, they're able to identify the hair. And then as they're talking about hair, she'll slip in something like, "What kind of expression did they have?" And if they're able to answer that question, they saw the perpetrator's face. One of the big examples that she uses, one of her big stories, is Officer Paul Deason. He was an officer with the police department, and he was patrolling and stopped a guy just to give him a generic speeding ticket. Well, at that moment, Donald Eugene Dutton got out of his car and decided to just walk up and shoot Officer Paul Deason in the head and in the back. Dutton got back into the car, ended up driving over Officer Deason, dragging him underneath the car for 60 feet. Officer Deason, close to death, walked back to his car and called for help on himself. Lori went to go sit in front of him at the hospital. Officer Deason was frustrated and angry. He's like, I didn't see the face. I just walked up and I just saw a gun flash. I didn't see his face. I didn't see anything. And so she asked about the hair. And then she asked him, what kind of expression did he have? And Officer Deason replied, he looked like a shark, like he cared about nothing. So utilizing that method, Lois was able to make a sketch, and that was released to the local news stations. And inmates in a local jail believed that this person was Donald Eugene Dutton. And he actually ended up getting caught after he was caught shoplifting a chainsaw from Sears. He was caught, arrested, and then charged. And his portrait that Lois did, thanks to Officer Deason, is a great example of people actually seeing the face. But their mind, say in an interview, they may have glossed over it because her portrait looked so close and spot on to Donald Eugene Dutton. She's been called all over the country to work and assist out of other police departments on other cases as well. Lois has written multiple textbooks as well as a handful of nonfiction books as well. And she's also a huge advocate for not only this study, but also the science behind it. Because as of right now, law enforcement has a couple different systems that they use. They have the AFIS, which is the Automated Fingerprint Identification System. They have CODIS, which is Combined DNA Index System. And then they have FIS, which is the Facial Identification System. In that system, you can actually upload sketches into the computer, and then it automatically runs code and cross-references suspect photos. Super interesting stuff. And this is how important forensic artistry can be. There was a blind woman, and she uses a cane to walk. She's totally blind, and she was riding on the bus trying to go home. She got off the bus, and she was eventually raped. And no one thought that he would be caught. I mean, he raped a blind woman. Lois sat in front of the bus driver who drove the blind woman, and he remembered her getting off the bus, and there was a man who followed her off the bus. And the bus driver kept saying, no, I didn't see anything. I just saw his side profile. And so Lois sat in front of him. What kind of hair did he have? Okay. What kind of eyes did he have? What kind of expression? Lois's sketch was posted in a nearby grocery store, and the manager of that grocery store believed that one of their employees, he was literally about to fire, was the perpetrator. He was brought in to do a voice lineup for the victim, and she chose him. Not only that, but she was able to take police to exactly where her assault had taken place, and they collected DNA evidence that was thus able to lock in a conviction against David Zayas. Without the portrait, that likely would not have happened. And the thing about it is that the portrait itself isn't even good. And what I find so fascinating about Lois and a lot of her stories is that she even fully admits, she's like, look, this sketch sucked. I didn't do a great job here. But just getting one or two features correct jogged the memory of this grocery store manager, bringing to justice a blind woman's rapist. And a whole other aspect of forensic art that I didn't even know existed. Lois Gibson has met with Holocaust survivors and drew pictures of their families that were lost or murdered. Her portraits are hanging in the National Holocaust Museum. One Jewish survivor that she met was 16 years old when she was in a concentration camp. Both of her parents had been killed. While she was in the camp, she was starving to death. She asked another prisoner who just happened to do work as a bricklayer to kill her. She told him, "You have the tools. Please kill me. I can't go on like this." The next day, he brought her a hard-boiled egg wrapped in a newspaper and told her to read the paper. And this was towards the end of the war when Allied troops were making their way through and liberating camps. The paper mentioned that liberation was close, so she persisted, she kept on, and she actually ended up living through the entire ordeal. Lois sat across from her, listened to her stories, and drew her parents for her so that she would have some physical representation of them. She's now a teacher and author primarily, and she does still do speaking engagements with law enforcement agencies and cities, advocating for the use of forensic artists. And it's more important now than ever. Imagine back in the 70s and 80s. An artist would meet with a witness, do the sketch. The photograph would end up on that night's news segment. Now it's almost instantaneous. Any artist can make the sketch, immediately send it to a detective, or have the detective text or email it, and then it can just go right online, right onto social media, just within seconds of it happening. Like, have you ever seen a crime happen on a wide scale and then literally within 5 minutes you have a forensic artist's rendition of that perpetrator? The sooner you get the sketch out, the better. And 45 states in this country do not have forensic artists. A really fascinating statistic she cites is fingerprints solve less than 1% of crimes. And she says she's generous by giving it like 8 or 9%, but fingerprints alone solve less than 1% of crimes. Sketch artists can solve between 31 and 78%. And in one of her videos, she used the example of the Elizabeth Smart kidnapping. Mary Catherine saw the man who kidnapped Elizabeth Smart and told her dad and said, "Dad, it's the guy who you called Emmanuel, and he worked on the roof with you when you're doing the home stuff. He took Elizabeth." So Lois called Elizabeth Smart's uncle and told them to get a sketch artist. Daylene Nielsen walked into the Salt Lake City, Utah Police Department and sat down with Ed Smart. And what came of that was a super close rendition, like a very, very, very close portrait of Brian David Mitchell. The police were like, meh, whatever. But America's Most Wanted put the sketch live on air, and 12 days later, 4 people recognized Brian David Mitchell with multiple women, including Elizabeth Smart. That's how they actually got Elizabeth Smart back. In 2017, she earned the Guinness Book of World Records for being the most successful forensic artist, and she gained over 1,000 cases solved, which that's absolutely insane. She did retire from the, and lastly, Lois did retire from the Houston Police Department in 2021, but she's still teaching a class. Like, you can go to her website, you can sign up for a class, and she will teach you how to do this because she has such a love for the art. And if you look at the statistics, which I did double check and I did verify, she's not wrong. And it's actually really scary. Remember, 45 states don't have full-time forensic artists in this country. Can you imagine? Remember how there's an active serial killer in Chicago, if not multiple, but at least one? Like, people have seen this person potentially. Or imagine if they had a full-time forensic artist that could sit down in front of some of these areas. And I don't know. It's just, it seems like a given, right? I know that our police departments are a little stressed, but based on statistics and the data alone, it's really unfortunate that every state doesn't have a full-time artist. But yeah, that is it on Lois Gibson. Again, she has several books out, textbooks if you want to go more clinical, but I highly suggest you check her out. In the very least, look up her. She has a YouTube channel. You can see a couple of her seminars online as well. It's so fascinating. And if anything, what she does is so fascinating. And I love her personality. She's so confident and sure of herself. And honestly, she teaches you a lot in her seminars. But that's it for this episode, guys. Thank you so much for listening. If you have an idea for an episode, don't forget Patreon patrons get first dibs there. And the polls will be opening tomorrow. So for you patrons, don't forget to drop the episode that you want to hear next. And the finalists will battle to the death. And the finalists will battle for that final spot. Again, apologies on the extra ragged voice. For some reason, I'm losing it. And for some reason, I'm losing it. Apologies on the ultra raggedy voice in this episode. For some reason, I'm losing my voice. I have no idea why. You can find us everywhere on social media at We Saw the Devil Podcast, WeSawTheDevil.com. And yeah, see y'all later this weekend with a Chris Chan episode. Until next crime.